Sometimes parents end up asking their own children for something that should never have to be begged for: respect. They feel invisible, ignored, or worse, treated with indifference. The most painful part isn't the physical distance, but the emotional one. You can live under the same roof and still feel like you no longer have a voice or a place. It's a silent blow, hard to put into words, because no one wants to admit that their own children no longer look at them with admiration. But there's an uncomfortable truth. The more you chase love, the further respect slips away. Many parents, especially later in life, fall into that trap. They try to make up for the lack of interest with more attention, more favors, more patience than the soul can bear. They hope their children's gratitude will serve as a form of recognition, and when it doesn't come, the guilt and confusion become unbearable. However, there is a way out. It's not about hardening your heart, but about finding balance again. When you stop begging for affection and start respecting yourself, something deep within shifts. Others, including your children, can feel it. Dignity, when nurtured, doesn't need to shout. It's sensed, and it's contagious. If this is your first time here, my name is Gabriel. I created this space to offer you tools and reflections that can help you live with serenity without losing your dignity or your peace, even when others don't change. I invite you to stay, to listen without judgment and with an open heart. Stay until the end, because the final lesson will show you why self-love, especially in maturity, can become the most powerful source of respect. Let's begin. The first trap that keeps a child from respecting their parents as adults is the constant search for approval. For years, many carried the belief that being a good father or mother meant pleasing, accommodating, and avoiding conflict. But when that attitude persists into adulthood, it becomes a silent form of submission. You start measuring your own worth by your children's moods or opinions. Instead of being a guide, you become a fearful spectator of their judgment. So far, we've talked about the pain of feeling ignored or undervalued, but that pain deepens when you begin to depend on others for validation. Stoicism teaches something crucial. We don't control what others think of us, only what we choose to think of ourselves. Epictetus said it clearly: "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When you live seeking your children's approval, respect fades, because the love you beg for becomes conditional love. Breaking the need for approval doesn't mean becoming cold. It means refusing to trade your peace away. It's about learning to say no without guilt and accepting that, painful as it may be, not every moment of distance is rejection. Sometimes, children pull away because they need to grow, and true respect blooms when parents allow themselves to grow too. It's a daily choice to stop being both judge and beggar of yourself and reclaim ownership of your serenity. I remember a woman who once wrote to me saying she felt that her daughter had stopped loving her. She told me that, to please her, she accepted things that made her feel humiliated, visits only when convenient, long silences, affection laced with demands. One day, exhausted, she decided to stop that cycle. She didn't argue, she simply stopped insisting. Within a few months, everything shifted. Her daughter began reaching out again, not because she begged, but because her quiet firmness sent a message. My love remains, but my surrender does not. That's where true respect begins, when you stop competing to be loved and start protecting your dignity. The need for approval often disguises itself as tenderness, but it's really a form of fear. And a child cannot respect someone who loses themselves just to preserve the bond. Emotional authority doesn't come from control, but from the calm assurance of knowing you are enough. Perhaps it's worth asking yourself, when in your life did you feel you had to earn the love of someone who was already yours? How many times did you mistake kindness for self-denial? Behind those questions lies an open door, the door to the kind of respect that begins within. With that in mind, let's move forward to something essential. Because once the need for approval dissolves, space opens up for a different kind of connection, one born from genuine presence, free of begging or demands, where even silence becomes an expression of love. Once you stop seeking approval, the next natural step is to learn how to offer presence without anxiety. Many parents try to keep their bond with their children alive through sheer persistence, calls, messages, favors, invitations that go unanswered, and every silence hurts. But behind that persistence lies something deeper, the fear of disappearing. The irony is that in trying to keep the connection alive at any cost, the opposite happens. The attention you demand turns into distance. The presence you impose becomes noise. We've already understood that respect cannot be built on need. With that in mind, the second principle teaches that true authority comes from balance, being available without intruding, showing affection without begging for it. Being present doesn't mean hovering. It means being at peace with yourself while offering sincere companionship. In Stoicism, that attitude is called euthymia, serenity in action, without anxiety over the outcome. Think of that person who, without speaking much, manages to make everyone listen when they finally do. They don't need to raise their voice because their energy itself commands respect. That is the power of presence. A mother or father who knows how to simply be without demanding or insisting creates a bond that lasts. The child may drift away physically, but they know that love is always there, not as a debt, but as a solid foundation to which they can return. I remember a father who told me he used to call his son every day without getting an answer. One day, tired of feeling ignored, he decided to change his routine. Instead of dialing the number, he began taking a walk in the park at the same hour. He stopped waiting for a message and started noticing life around him. Weeks later, his son called unexpectedly. "You seem different, calmer," he said. That simple sense of calm became the bridge no phone call had ever been able to build. Authentic presence doesn't ask for recognition. It's like a lamp glowing in the night. It doesn't chase anyone, but its light draws in those who seek warmth. Serenity is magnetic. Anxiety repels. That's why respect doesn't come from showing desperation, but from radiating balance. When you're at peace with yourself, others begin to see you differently. It can be hard to accept that the best way to get closer is to give space. But relationships can only breathe when they're not suffocated. And it's in that very space that children discover their father or mother also has a full life, with projects, moments of silence, and a dignity that depends on no one. Perhaps the secret lies in understanding that to love is not to insist, but to be calmly available. Within that mature stillness hides a silent message. I'm here, but I don't lose myself in you. With that said, let's move on to a key lesson for maintaining this balance without losing inner strength. The ability to set boundaries with serenity and without punishment. When you learn to be present without begging for attention, a new need arises, protecting that serenity. And that can only be done by setting boundaries. Not boundaries born of anger or revenge, but of mature love. Respect begins when you stop over-explaining and start acting with consistency. In families, words often become unnecessary once actions are clear. A boundary isn't a wall that divides, but a line of self-respect that shows others how you wish to be treated. So far, we've seen that presence without anxiety creates space for mutual respect. Now, this step reminds us that without boundaries, that calm quickly fades. Many parents mistake setting limits for stopping loving, and that mistake makes them give in where they should hold firm. Saying no doesn't mean closing your heart. It means protecting love from wearing out. A healthy boundary doesn't aim to punish the other person, but to care for the relationship with dignity. I remember a mother who told me she didn't want to sound harsh with her adult son, so she always gave in. Every time he asked for money, she said yes, even though it hurt. Every time he ignored her, she still reached out. One day, she decided to stop the cycle. The next time he called just to ask for something, she calmly said, "Son, I love you, but I can't give you that right now." No lecture, no tears, no complaints, just a clear and loving boundary. Over time, her son began calling her for other reasons. The relationship improved. The boundary had freed them both. The wisest limits aren't shouted, they're upheld. They're quiet but firm. It's the calmness with which you say, "This far," not out of anger, but out of certainty. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Applied to family life, that phrase becomes a compass. Respect grows when you refuse to respond with the same chaos you receive. One of Stoicism's keys is to act according to your own principles, not the other person's impulses. If your children lose control, your role isn't to imitate them, but to offer the opposite example: calm, consistency, and consequence. Boundaries aren't about showing who's in charge. They remind others that your love is not for sale. And though that lesson may feel uncomfortable at first, with time, it turns into admiration. Setting boundaries also means holding them without justifying them. Explaining too much weakens clarity. When you give a reason, let it be brief and honest. Sometimes it's enough to say, "No, because that's my decision," and let silence do the rest. Respect blooms in that space where the essential is no longer up for negotiation. Remember that boundaries are also a mirror. They don't just teach your children how to treat you, they remind you how much you value yourself. A boundary is a way of saying, "I won't abandon myself just to please others," and that inner message carries tremendous power. I invite you to pause for a moment and reflect. Which boundaries are you holding firmly, and which are you still negotiating out of fear of losing affection? That answer can change not only your relationships, but the way you move through the world. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and share your name and country in the comments. I read every comment with gratitude, and it brings me joy to see the many places we walk this path together. Tell me too what other rules you would add to this list to earn respect without losing peace. With that said, let's return to our thread. Because once we learn to set boundaries without guilt, it's time to cultivate something even more subtle and powerful: the ability to observe without intervening. After learning to set boundaries with serenity, the next step is to resist the urge to fix everything. Many parents, even after their children have become adults, still feel the need to step in, advise, warn, or save them from their mistakes. But that kind of love, when overdone, turns into control. And control, even when disguised as care, always ends up eroding respect. Observing without intervening is an art that requires humility, accepting that we are no longer the main characters in our children's lives, but witnesses who accompany them from the right distance. Up to this point, we've seen that true authority comes from calm and boundaries. Now, we go a step deeper, learning to sustain silence as a form of wisdom. In Stoicism, there's an essential idea: what doesn't depend on you shouldn't steal your peace. And what your children decide, feel, or experience doesn't always depend on you. Mature love understands this, and instead of panicking, trusts life itself. I remember a man who told me, "I can't stand watching my son make the same mistakes I did." I looked at him and replied, "And yet, that's how you learned." That sentence left him silent. He realized that keeping his son from making mistakes was, in truth, keeping him from growing. From that day on, he chose to observe more and advise less. The interesting thing was that once he stopped giving lessons, his son began to ask him for advice. Sometimes respect appears when you leave enough space for the other person to seek it on their own. Observing without intervening doesn't mean being indifferent, it means trusting. It's watching with empathy, not judgment. It's accompanying with serenity, not urgency. Marcus Aurelius said we must remain untroubled by what we cannot change. In family life, that means letting go of the impulse to fix what no longer belongs to us. Some pains can only be healed by experience, and that too is a form of love. Learning to remain silent in certain moments may be one of the hardest tests of maturity, but also one of the most freeing. Silence is not always absence. Sometimes it's deep presence. It's saying to the other person, "I trust you, even when you don't do what I would do." That trust is an act of respect, both toward them and toward yourself. Each time you hold back the impulse to intervene, you're practicing a form of wisdom that your children can feel without words. They sense the difference between being watched with calm and being watched with fear. And though they may not say it, that difference makes them feel freer and paradoxically closer. Observing without intervening is also a lesson in humility. It reminds us that we don't own anyone's life, not even the lives of those we love most. It's letting the river follow its course, trusting that in the end, everything finds its way. Behind this attitude lies a quiet peace that spreads to others. And it is precisely that peace that turns a father or mother into a figure of respect. Because when you learn to stay silent at the right moment, you create space for love to mature. With that in mind, let's open another door. If silence teaches, example sustains. Let's see why replacing complaints with example is one of the most powerful rules of all. By now it's clear that respect isn't earned through lectures, but through consistency. When a child hears more complaints than actions, they stop listening. But when they witness quiet changes, something within them begins to realign. In maturity, example becomes the most powerful form of teaching. There's no need to persuade or insist, just to embody what you preach. The strongest authority doesn't shout, it's evident in how you live. So far, we've talked about the power of silence and observation. Now comes a practical lesson. Complaining keeps the conflict alive by focusing attention on the problem, while example directs it toward the solution. Seneca said, "To teach is to learn twice," and perhaps no phrase is truer for a father or mother trying to regain their children's respect. When you change your behavior, others can feel it, even if they never say it. I remember the story of a grandmother who constantly complained that her children never visited. She would say things like, "You don't care about me anymore," or "You only call when you need something." One day, tired of her own lament, she decided to do something different. She started taking painting classes, going out with her neighbors, and cooking for herself with joy. Little by little, her energy shifted. Weeks later, her children began to reach out. "Mom, you seem different," they said. And she smiled, because she had realized that her example was far more powerful than her complaint. Complaints stem from the desire to control. Example grows from the desire to evolve. When we stop complaining, we create space for others to notice change on their own. In families, that shift can transform everything. Children who once avoided their parents out of exhaustion begin seeking them out for inspiration. There's also something deeply spiritual in that transformation. Stoicism teaches that it's not about changing the world, but about changing how we stand within it. And when that serenity becomes part of everyday life, in how you speak, eat, and respond to conflict, respect follows naturally. It's not a reward, but the inevitable result of integrity. Replacing complaints with example also has an inner effect. It strengthens self-esteem. Every consistent action reinforces your sense of dignity, and that energy, though unspoken, is felt. Adult children respect those who respect themselves far more than those who play the victim. The most powerful example they can receive from their parents is to see them rise without drama, move forward without resentment, and love without demands. Sometimes a single question can put it all into perspective. What message are you sending through the way you live? If your children watched you but couldn't hear your words, what would they learn from you? That honest reflection can be the starting point of a quiet but profound transformation. From there, everything begins to shift. Because when you stop complaining and start living with purpose, respect blooms again without having to ask for it. And it's from that maturity that another essential rule is born: learning to accept distance without dramatizing it. Understanding that love also means knowing when to let go. After understanding the power of example, the next step requires even deeper calm, accepting distance without turning it into a tragedy. Many parents feel that if their children drift away, it means they've done something wrong. But that's not always the case. Distance is often a natural part of growth, and resisting it only brings more pain. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means trusting that relationships built on respect will find their way back when the time is right. We've already seen that boundaries and example sustain respect, but there's something even subtler: freedom. Respect also grows when you stop demanding presence and begin valuing others' autonomy. Children who feel free to come and go return with gratitude. Those who feel watched or guilt-tripped pull away even more. It's a paradox. The more control you try to exert, the less connection you actually achieve. In Stoicism, accepting what you can't control is a form of wisdom, and that includes accepting that your children, out of love or necessity, will take their own paths. Sometimes life takes them far away physically, other times emotionally. It doesn't matter. What truly counts is maintaining inner serenity, because that serenity is the invisible thread that keeps you connected even when there are no words. I remember a woman who cried because her son lived in another country and rarely called. She told me, "I feel like he's forgotten me." But with time, she realized it wasn't forgetfulness. It was life. One day, he called her to share his achievements and struggles without her having to reach out first. "I needed to do it my way," he told her. She then understood that love doesn't disappear with distance. It simply changes form. Accepting distance is also an act of self-love. It's about protecting your own energy instead of wasting it trying to control the uncontrollable. When you stop dramatizing, your heart grows lighter and respect returns. Children can feel the difference between a mother who suffers from absence and one who trusts life. The first creates guilt. The second inspires admiration. Perhaps the real challenge lies in changing your perspective. Instead of thinking, "My child has drifted away," you could tell yourself, "My child is building their own path." That phrase doesn't erase nostalgia, but it transforms it into understanding. Because acceptance isn't surrender, it's choosing peace over pride or anxiety. As you learn to live with serenity in the face of distance, something beautiful happens. Love becomes refined, purer, less dependent. It's no longer about physical presence, but about emotional peace. And that peace, inevitably, is felt on the other side. When acceptance takes root, something that may have slept for years awakens again: self-love. And from that foundation, every relationship transforms. Because only those who deeply respect themselves can truly inspire respect in others. From here, let's open another door: the power of rebuilding your own life beyond the role of mother or father. One of the most liberating transformations happens when you realize that your identity extends far beyond family titles. For decades, many parents have lived for others, postponing their desires, their rest, their dreams. But there comes a time when continuing to revolve around your children becomes a subtle form of self-forgetting. Reclaiming your own life isn't selfish, it's a mature expression of love. It's saying, I love you, but I also have a world of my own to nurture. With this in mind, we can see that accepting distance isn't a loss, it's the recovery of inner space. That space can be filled with new passions, friendships, learning, or healthy habits that restore your energy. In Stoicism, the idea of living according to nature doesn't just refer to the environment. It means living according to your true essence. And your essence isn't limited to being a mother or father. You are also a person, a soul, a story, and a possibility. I remember a woman who, when her youngest child left home, felt that everything had ended. She spent her days looking at photos, replaying memories, and her energy slowly faded. One day, almost by chance, she accepted a neighbor's invitation to go for a walk. That small outing became a habit, and that habit turned into a network of new friendships. Within months, she had regained the light in her eyes. I feel alive again, she told me. And she realized then that her children had never been her only source of purpose. They had simply been part of the journey. Rebuilding your life doesn't mean starting from scratch, but rather giving new meaning to what you've lived. Everything you gave remains valuable, but now you can offer to yourself what you once gave to others. Reading a book slowly, cooking for yourself, learning something new, caring for your body, meditating, these simple acts send a clear message to the soul. I'm still growing. And that growth, far from distancing you from your children, makes you even more inspiring. There is something deeply powerful about seeing an older adult who continues to reinvent themselves. They radiate hope, curiosity, and dignity. It's a reminder that life doesn't end with motherhood or fatherhood. It expands when you stop defining yourself solely by your relationships. That inner independence becomes a quiet example for your children, teaching them that they too can grow older with purpose and joy. Rebuilding your life also means making peace with the passage of time. Instead of focusing on what's gone, you give thanks for what remains. Instead of mourning what's lost, you plant what's new. The inner garden blooms again when you care for it with attention and love. No one can do it for you. It's a deeply personal and sacred act. When life begins to revolve around you once more, respect from others comes naturally, because the world respects those who respect themselves, and that self-love, cultivated with patience and consistency, becomes a magnetic energy that radiates serenity. From here, let's take one final step inward to explore the power of self-love in maturity and how it becomes a guiding light for everyone around you. When self-love becomes strong, something inside you grows still. There's no longer a need to argue or prove anything. Conversations that once felt like battlegrounds turn into simple exchanges or even wise silences. Coherence, when genuine, doesn't need defending. To argue for respect is a contradiction. Those who live with dignity don't compete to be right, they simply stay true to themselves. With this in mind, we can understand that respect isn't demanded, it's projected. Every time we fall into an argument trying to make our children understand what they should already know, we actually lose power. Words become unnecessary when actions already speak clearly. In Stoicism, Epictetus taught that the wise person doesn't need to explain their path, their life is their argument. That sentence perfectly sums up this principle. I remember a father who told me that after years of constant arguments with his son, he decided to stop debating. Instead, he began living differently, more calmly, more organized, more consistent with the values he had always wanted to teach. Over time, His son's tone changed, the reproaches stopped, and he began to listen. It wasn't the words that reached him. It was the example. True respect blooms in silence. Arguing is a way of trying to control. Living your values, on the other hand, means letting go of control and trusting time. If you stand by your principles calmly, without aggression or rigidity, your presence becomes stronger than any argument. Children don't respect the one who shouts, they respect the one who stays steady without losing peace. Often, arguments stem from the desire to be understood. But there's a deeper level, understanding yourself. When you know who you are and what you stand for, you no longer need to convince anyone. That inner clarity is magnetic. Others can feel it, and even if they disagree, they respect you. Each time you choose not to enter a dispute, you're choosing to protect your energy. It's not about staying silent out of fear, but about staying silent out of wisdom. There are truths that only time can teach better than any speech. And there are relationships that heal only when you stop arguing and start living with consistency. Embody your values in daily life, in how you greet others, how you spend your time, what you consume, and how you speak about people. Every gesture is a chance to set an example. Consistency is the universal language of respect. Those who speak it no longer need to defend themselves. And when that coherence becomes part of who you are, the final lesson of this journey emerges: to forgive and let go without forgetting who you are. Because the deepest form of respect is not won through authority, but through inner freedom. Reaching this point means you've walked a deep and transformative path. Forgiveness is the final door, and perhaps the hardest one to open. Not because others always deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Holding on to resentment is like carrying stones in your soul. It keeps you from moving forward, withers your joy, and steals your presence. Letting go doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. True forgiveness isn't a forced reconciliation, but an inner release. It's the way you tell yourself, I no longer want my past to rule my peace. We've already seen that respect is born from calm, consistency, and self-love. But without forgiveness, all of that begins to erode. Because resentment, even when quiet, leaves cracks in the soul. Children can sense when a parent lives with bitterness, and that energy pushes them away. But when an adult releases the past without anger, the air changes. There's no more heaviness, only lightness. Respect grows in that calm atmosphere where the past is no longer a chain, but a lesson. I remember a man who, after years of estrangement from his son, told me, I no longer expect an apology, I just want to live in peace. He achieved that when he understood that forgiveness didn't mean justifying what had happened. It meant no longer carrying it. Not long after, his son called him, not to reopen old wounds, but to share a cup of coffee. That simple gesture proved that when you change your energy, the world responds. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's spiritual strength. It's letting go of the need to have the last word and choosing peace over pride. In Stoic philosophy, forgiveness is a form of self-mastery, freeing the mind from resentment to regain control over oneself. Marcus Aurelius put it wisely, the best revenge is to be unlike the one who wronged you. Letting go also means remembering who you are. Forgiveness must never be confused with forgetfulness or submission. You can forgive and still keep your boundaries. You can let go without going back. True self-respect requires that clarity. It's not about closing your eyes, but about opening your heart. Forgiving your children, your parents, or even yourself doesn't change the past, but it completely changes how you inhabit it. When resentment dissolves, life starts to move again. Energy returns, your expression softens, your body breathes differently. And without realizing it, you become living proof of a simple truth. Inner freedom is achieved when there's nothing left to prove. The final lesson is this: letting go isn't losing. It's making room for new things to bloom. When you choose to forgive, you choose to return to yourself, unmasked, unafraid, and unburdened. And from that place of serenity, dignity becomes your natural way of being. Sometimes, the greatest act of respect toward others is to stop insisting on changing what's already past and begin to fully live what's still possible. With that understanding, we approach the closing chapter where we'll gather the deeper meaning of this entire journey and turn it into a message of gratitude and freedom. Throughout this journey, we've seen that a child's respect isn't earned through pleading, but through inner transformation. That dignity isn't demanded, it's cultivated. We began by exploring the invisible weight of the need for approval and arrived at the lightness of forgiveness. Along the way, we learned to stop begging for attention, to set calm boundaries, to observe without intervening, to replace complaints with example, to accept distance, to rebuild life beyond the role of parent, to nurture self-love, to embody our values, and finally, to let go with wisdom. The entire path points to a central truth. Respect blooms when you live from peace, not from fear. I want to thank you sincerely for walking with me to this point. Every minute you've spent listening, reflecting, or questioning yourself is an act of love toward your own growth. Your presence makes it possible for this space to keep expanding, helping more people find serenity amid the noise. You are not alone in this search. There are many of us learning at any age to reclaim our calm, our boundaries, and the joy of living with purpose. My name is Gabriel, and I created this project with one clear intention: to offer you stoic and human tools that help you protect your peace even when others don't change. Because serenity doesn't depend on the world understanding you, it depends on you learning to listen to yourself. That is the promise of this space, to remind you that you can still build healthy, dignified, and meaningful relationships, starting with the one you have with yourself. Before we finish, I'd like to invite you to leave a comment sharing which country you're listening from, and write this phrase: I respect myself to be respected. Let that be the seal of this encounter. Share it with someone who might need to hear it today: a child, a friend, a sibling. You might be giving them the start of a new perspective. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, leave a like, and activate the bell so we can keep growing together on this path of practical wisdom and serenity. I'll leave you with one final thought. The deepest form of respect can't be imposed or begged. It radiates, and those who live from that inner peace become, without trying, a beacon for others. You'll now see 2 videos on the screen. Choose one and continue exploring this journey of growth, dignity, and calm.